Hey, it's Andrew Grove for Economist.com, and I have my fourth hand entry review video of this year so far. This is an extension of the last video. The last video was 3-bet pots in position. I only got through 2 hands in Omaha Ranger, and this video I'm going to get through 1, but I'll explain why. I find that with these videos so far, I've gotten through a lot of cool stuff, but I don't cover all the topics that I want to cover. I kind of get too in-depth, I think, maybe, into one specific hand where I might want to go over a lot more hands. So I'm going to try to strike a balance in this video. This first hand I'm going to go through in the same way I've done the last 3 videos, very extensively, or somewhat extensively. Maybe not as extensively as the other hands, because this one kind of ends abruptly in a good way, I guess, or an expected way, I guess you could say. And then I will just go replayer style through a bunch more hands, trying to cover everything I can about the hands. And I've chosen lots of different types of hands and different board textures and stuff like that for 3-bet pots out of position that I think are that I wanted to include in the video, that I wanted to talk about a lot of different spots. Where with this, if I did in the same fashion as before, it would just be me going through like only 2 or 3 hands. So it's not too many spots, because obviously 3-bet pots out of position are one of the toughest spots in PLO, if not the toughest thing about PLO, especially as you get deeper. But I think all these hands are about 100 big blinds or so, because I don't play the ante tables much in the past few months, and these are the only hands I have in my database at the moment. So yeah, without further ado, let's just get into this hand, and then we'll see what ensues after this. So it's folded to the button as we expected, and again, all these hands in this video are going to be me 3-betting from the small blind or big blind versus a cutoff or button open. So 3-betting versus steal, and we're out of position no matter what. It's not us 3-betting in the big blind versus small blind steal. It's only cutoff and button. So this player opens 3x, which is, I would say, standard, but it's it's not a min raise or anything. So, and he's only opening 42% as a steal from the button, so it's kind of tight actually. It's really tight, I would say, for even for 200 zoom. Maybe it's kind of normal, but in general, I think you find a lot of other players, even a 200 zoomer, stealing a lot wider. So that might make this hand less of a candidate to 3-bet, but it's really connected, hits a lot of different board textures. It's double suited. It really can't go too wrong 3-betting this hand. But seeing how tight he is in retrospect, I think I can just call. So I do 3-bet. We hit, a really good board texture for our range, obviously, because it's ace high. Like, we're gonna have more 2-pair and set combos and stuff, as you'll see in a second. And generally, we're just gonna be betting this board texture as a 3-better more than we would be checking, just because we have a range advantage and we have more hands that we can bet, and we can get away with more bluffs because our villain just can't do much about it. So we do bet. I pick and it's a little less than 2/3 sizing. I don't know how I feel about it. I think it's okay. I kind of want action on this board, but I want some protection. I can't really bet like half pot or anything, or like less than that, because there are a decent amount of draws. Like, not really like big draws, but like he's going to be peeling a lot, so I want to get value. I mean, there's a lot of like pair and gutter hands the player in position can peel with. So I'd like to bet a little larger than half pot, but not too big, because I do want him to peel with those hands, with my value hands. And villain folds, so that's the end of the hand. But let's look into some math about this hand. So this is Omaha Ranger. It's a really good program. If you're not using Omaha Ranger, which is reasonable because it's about $2,000, you can use PokerJuice, and you can do the same kind of stuff with this. PokerJuice has a lot of cool stuff you can use, but I think most of the good poker players nowadays, especially in PLO, are using PokerJuice or Omaha Ranger. At the very minimum, they're using Odds Oracle. But again, I think Poker Deuce is more of a economical option for a lot of players, but I think it's not worse. In fact, it might be better, especially the new Poker Deuce 2.0. Anyway, about this hand, it's enough of a ramble about software and stuff. So I put in the board texture and the main ranges for the hand. So the 3-bet 8% opposition, for me, that's about the 3-bet range I was 3-betting, which I think is even fine versus a 42% button open. I don't know why I put 67% here. It does change the hand a lot. Yeah, it was his range. Okay, well, we're assuming this is versus a normal rig, or someone who's opening a more normal kind of button open range. I don't know why I put 67% there, but it's, whatever. It still works because this is going to be what you're facing against most of the time. And maybe when I made this, it has been a while since I actually created this. That might have been my intention. So Hero does crush this board. We have Ace 8 or better 25% of the time versus 12% for a Villain. And again, always look at frequencies. Do not look at hard combo counts. Like, yeah, Villain has 16,500 combos of these hands, and that's more than we have in our total range that gets to the flop here. But look at frequencies because that's what's most important. We have over twice as many wraps, middle pair plus an open ender, which is a decent bluffing hand. We have almost twice as much, and top pair plus nut gutter plus backdoor flush draw, which is a hand you might consider like stacking off on this board, like ace queen 10 with ace high diamonds, like the ace queen of diamonds. You might consider just bet calling. We have 2.5 times as many hands, or we have a 2.5 as many times as Villain. So I mean, obviously we crush this board. It's just cool to look at specifically how it is. So I divided this our betting and checking ranges on this board because we have some hands that want to check, that want some pot control, and we're not always going to see by this board with air unless Villain's overfolding. So we need some protection for our air as well. So out of our total range that gets to the flop, I broke it down in value, semi-bluffs, and marginal hands, and I purposely left out some hands. I'll explain that in a second. And this is going to be versus his range overall that gets to the flop for the equity. So it's ace 8 or better, our wraps, so jack 10 7 or better, or maybe could be 10 7 6 or better. And then our ace queen 10 with the backdoor flush draw kind of hands. For semi-bluffs, I put in a gutter and a backdoor flush draw that does not have top pair or better, or an open ender or better, because those would be kind of stronger hands. So if it, was top pair and a gutter and backdoor flush draw, like we would kind of consider it not to be a bluff. So this can include middle pair, bottom pair, and that does include jack 7 8 in it. Actually, jack 7 is a pretty good candidate because it can hit some other straights, as well as like a running like 5 6, or it can hit like 2 backdoor flush draws. And then that's about 12.5% of our range. So that's a decent amount of semi-bluffs we have. And we can include some other hands as well. You could throw like an open ender in there as well if you want to. Stuff like that, depending on what Villain's doing. And then some of our marginal hands we want to check, like just bare top pair. Say like ace king queen 5 double suited. We could decide to check if we want to, and that's about 18.5% of range, just bare top pair. So there's even other hands, like maybe like king 10 6 double suited, kings with a gutter. We could consider checking and pot controlling because we can call, and then we can call a flop bet and stuff like that for some polarized flop betting range. So I didn't include all the hands here, but aside from air, there are a lot of hands. Like I didn't include open ender. I didn't include too many. I didn't even include 8 9 in here. 8 9's a decent part of our range here, like 8 9 7 5, or like queen 10 9 8, 2 pair and a gutter, stuff like that was not in here. I think, and even jack 10 9 8's not in here because I didn't include open enders or 2 pair. So just getting a feel for it. And I think one of the coolest things to see from this is that our semi-bluff hands, so as the gutter and backdoor flush draw, have about 45% versus overall range against the flop. So that's pretty good. There's a lot of things you could do with that. And one of the main ideas about having a hand like this as your semi-bluff as opposed to like, I don't know, bear kings or something like that is because it can barrel a lot of turns. It can get equity. So when you have semi-bluffing hands, you want to have hands that will improve on turns so you actually have equity. And you have hands that can comfortably barrel 2 or 3 streets, like that have decent blockers and can pick up backdoor draws and stuff like that. So, down to looking at villain's range. I'm already spending a little bit too much time on this hand that I wanted to, about 10 minutes so far. But really quick, I think it's important, is villain's range breakdown versus our semi-bluff equities. So, I put in our range here, like our semi-bluff equity hands, like the gutter plus backdoor flush draw that got to the flop. And then I broke down his range. So I did include some open-enders and stuff in his range now. These are a little bit different than before. So it's the same value range from us before. So the ace-8 or better wraps, and then like the ace-queen-10 kind of hands. And he does have those decent amount of time, 23%. So he's not going to be folding this a super ton amount. Like, it's actually like pretty cool to see because he almost meets minimum defense frequency here. I think it's about 60% or so. So we'd have to bet a decent amount for him not to continue with these hands. Especially, this is again against a 67% range, but against this other villain, I think he probably it's probably kind of rare that he's actually folding. But we can also put in our dead cards too, and I think that would have worked better for this. Always include dead cards if you want to see how that actually affects villains' ranges. And surprisingly, they don't have much of an effect, so I think that's why I didn't do it. Unless it's like you're really blocking a huge part of their calling range. Like if we had pocket aces here, like this sub range on the flop like decreases a lot. Like it removes all like the all the 2-pair combos except 8-9. And his top pair hands, like it removes like so many of those, so this frequency will go down a lot. But adding our actual whole cards in this hand wouldn't affect it too much. But put in some potential floats for him, like a gutter and a backdoor flush draw, and that's a decent amount of his range here. And some of his marginal hands, like top pair and a gutter, open ender, like a bear open ender, or at least open ender that doesn't have top pair, is a decent amount of hands as well. But as you can see, this is the important part. Our semi-bluff range, or at least this portion of our semi-bluff range, we can include some other hands in this as well, has a decent amount of equity, like 30% versus his top value hands. That's a lot. I mean, that's pretty good for a semi-bluff, I would say. Versus his floats, we actually have an equity advantage, and versus his marginal hands, we have about a 42%. So pretty good. So these are things you definitely want to look at when you're constructing your ranges, because you want to see, if you want to construct semi-bluffs for your range, you want to see how the equity does against our range. And sometimes you find that, especially different parts of their range, they're going to continue. So you have a feel for like if they're floating you, like how much equity you have on turns and stuff like that. It's just really beneficial to do this work. And obviously, all spots are different. You're not going to memorize this stuff, but it's really helpful to look through hands like this in this manner. All right, so now I have about, for the second half of the video, I have about 14 hands I want to go over. So I'll try to do about a hand a minute here. I'm going to try not to spend too much time on any one of these spots. And I just try to pick a bunch of different spots that works out. And I realized that through the first 4 videos or so, I was like, every hand that I played, I won. I might have picked out those hands subconsciously. So I try to pick some hands where I lost or had to give up or something like that. So, in this first hand, I 3-bet. I think this 3-bet's actually like too loose. I think one of the reasons I did is because the big blind is defending 43% or so versus Steel, and I think it's defending even more if I call here, which isn't a huge disaster. Like my hand plays pretty well, and it's not squeezing that much. Only about let me see here, squeezing about 4.8%, so it's not a whole lot. I think he's just going to take a flop here. And our hand flop's okay, so I don't think I need to really 3-bet here. And plus, this is kind of loose. Edgy, it says he's opening 50% over 31 hands. When I played this hand, I think I had a lot more hands on him on my database then, so I think he's actually opening a lot wider, which is why I did this, or maybe I was just, I don't know, I just 3-bet wide. You know, it happens sometimes. He calls. And on this board texture is kind of tricky. I think our hand plays kind of bad as a check call, and I think he does stab a lot here, so I kind of wanted to avoid that. So I decided to start with a bet here, and I think you can bet a lot of hands here versus loose players and potentially stack off, or just take it from there and try to barrel. So since my hand plays kind of bad as a check call, and a check raise is definitely out of the question. Check folding seems kind of weak too with the backdoor flush draw and, you know, middle pair, the nut kicker. So I think, yeah, just betting here is fine. I think my sizing is okay too. I don't want to bet too small because with my mate hands I want protection, and with my draws I want some fold equity. So I think this fits out pretty well. And villain folds. In this next hand, we face the 3x open from a player who's opening 81% from the button, so quite wide. For some players, I'll just call this, but I think for him, it's going to work out pretty well as a 3-bet. Again, ace-high boards are really good for our range, so I want to pick out a sizing. And luckily, this is the same sizing I think I used in the Jack 8 7-4 hand, so I'm doing well with my sizings on the flop as far as using the percentage buttons on PokerStars, or even in Table Ninja if you want to set that up, or whatever hockey program you use to make sure your sizings are the same. So I like that I'm consistent so far with that. Villain calls, and on this turn, like, we have a barreling range. It's going to include, like, for value, it can be like ace queen or better, I think. And then we can also have some semi-bluffs like 10-9 hands or king-king hands or 10-10 hands if we want. They can comfortably bet now and have a good sizing for the river as well, the triple barrel. But with our hands, we don't block like anything. We don't block any good 2-pair combos. We don't block straights. We don't block any flush draws. So I think we're getting PO'd here a lot, and we have a hand that's really bad to bluff the river with. So sometimes if you don't have blockers, you just gotta kind of have to give up. And it doesn't mean your flop bet was bad. It just means, you know, kind of have to shut down. We hit 2-pair on the river, but it brings in the flush draw from the flop. So I think we're beat here almost always, and I would not hero call here. To hero call, you probably need the king of hearts in your hand, or 10 of hearts, or something like that. Some kind of hands that he would be turning like top pair to a bluff with, but a lot of top pair hands might just even check back here. And it's kind of hard for him to have bare top pair at this point because there's lots of it's pretty easy for him to have two pair at this point unless he had like ace 5-5-7. But if he's calling the flop with that, then he's going to be folding the turn a lot. So we don't have to really be worried about getting bluffed here. And he does show down ace queen, so I don't think our turn barrel would have worked. Although if we bet 3 streets, it would have worked. But with this hand, we'd be really overdoing it. And this next hand, a villain who's playing very recreationally, 100% VPEP pre-flop, but he's just opening tons of hands at 3-betting wide over a small sample so far. Opens, and I want to isolate this player for sure. Not to mention that I 3-bet this hand versus, you know, some regs as well, but he's opening so many hands it almost becomes almost a value raise, although not quite, I don't think. On this board texture, even though it's ace high, we don't have to bet as big like I did before, so I think around half pot would work, or even less or so. So I did do a little less than half pot. Villain calls, and I think his range for calling here is going to be any ace or better, king sometimes maybe, and definitely like flush draws. Obviously he's going to have trips as well sometimes. And perhaps he raises ace 6 and pocket 6s, or probably not pocket 6s, but maybe like pocket aces if he had them. So you can discount some of his range here. And I went for a turn barrel here, a little over half pot to set up a river shove. I I wanted that to look as my sizing or whatever, so it'd be like a half pot river shove. But I think I'd be better off betting a lower larger here, because I think if this villain calls, I'm not going to barrel river. Like, he would call here, like, the idea would be to get him to fold like a his pair of aces here, if you call it again. And I think if I want to do that, since I'm not barreling the river, I think I can go with a larger sizing, maybe closer to 70 if I wanted to. But even still, maybe he's not folding that. So, but I think in general, if I'm not going to barrel two streets, the larger sizing will be better. So anyway, he calls. And one of the reasons, again, to barrel the turn is with our backdoor flush draw. If we didn't pick that up, I think it's a lot more of a check fold. So on the river now, I just don't think I'm getting him to fold. I think he would have folded his flush draws on the turn unless he picked up a double flush draw. But I think I'm going to be running into it too much here. It kind of seems like he has a 6 as well. So I decided not to bet the river, and he has a boat. So his next hand's at the 200 ante tables. Decent reg on the button, opens to 3x. Very wide in general. I think I can flat here because Twin Caracas is squeezing about 8%, and he 3-bets pretty wide in general, especially at the ante games. So I think I can get a back raise in here quite effectively. Yeah, I think I actually do like a call in retrospect. I'm glad I'm reviewing some of these hands because I see maybe I'm 3-betting a little bit too wide, or 3-betting hands that maybe I shouldn't be in certain spots. Twin cold calls, and it's not really good for us. And this is just the concept to illustrate here. Like, I think no matter what, we should probably be just folding here. Just check folding here, I mean. But in general, just be, I mean, what I meant to say is we should be checking our whole range here, because we're not going to have a ton of 7-8 combos here, or 2-pair combos, or set combos, and those guys will. So when we do have it, we should check as well. And I just check folded once Pasta stabs there. This next hand, I 3-bet from the small blind, and again, it's a little bit loose because it's just not to the king or queen, and this player's not opening super wide from the button, only about 60%, and he seems to be playing pretty decently post flop. So I guess I could call here as well, but I chose a 3-bet. And on this flop, we have lots of options. We can bet call. We can bet fold if the player's, raising really tight, which I don't think this player is raising tight. So bet call will probably be the option if we're going to bet here versus him, or bet stock off anyway. You could also check raise. You could also check call. I think in real time I was going to be check calling this hand because it does play pretty decently on turns. So I wasn't really worried about getting blown off my equity or anything. So I do check. And on the turn, my checking range on this flop would probably include a lot of king X, maybe some aces, and some air as well. So I think if I had air that I was giving up with, I think I want to protect some of that. I want to have some check call hands here as well. Since I don't want him to just be able to bet and just take advantage of my range here. And plus two, if we bet, we can get raised by anything since we're perceived to be capped, and that puts this specific hand in a really difficult spot. So on river now, I do have some air still. I guess my air will be trying to think, ace, jack 10, 9. Although some of those hands are okay as bets because on the flop, because you can turn really well. Like you can turn hands that you want to barrel with. I mean, you can turn the draws that you can barrel with. Mixing up my terms here. So on the river, since I do have some air, although it'd be interesting to look in my range or poker juice how much air I have, because that would determine my bet sizing here. If I have lots of air, I can bet large. If I have not too much air, I can bet really small here for value. Maybe even do that with a merge range, so I include aces and maybe queens. Trying to get really thin value, although queens might be too thin. So as it stood, I thought I would have a lot of air here, so given I was checking the flop a lot, so I did indeed bet larger and did not get called. And I thought at the time, maybe this was true at the time, that I was checking the flop a super amount of the time, because it's a flop where a lot of turns become difficult, like 9, 7, 6, 4, 8, and 5 for your range. Even the king can be difficult for your betting range on the turn. His villains to be peeling a lot of kings. I was just trying to have more of a like a mixed strategy and include lots of checking and just experiment with that. So yeah, on to the next hand. I 3-bet an okay hand. Again, it's a hand I could call. It's kind of sad that I'm seeing some hands that I could probably peel with pre-flop, but you know, it is what it is. A villain was opening 56%. He's actually like one of the best dregs at 200, I think. At least one of the most winningest anyway. And this is a board in which I think I will have a betting range on, but it's going to be somewhat polarized. Maybe this is a hand that I could include in that range because I do block Jack 10. I block 2 pair and set combos. So actually this would be a decent hand to bet, I think. But I do decide to check. And once I check, I have to like check fold. And it's very, very difficult to continue on any turns, like an ace, a 4, a 9, even a jack's kind of iffy. Like those are the only turns I can really continue on. But I am 3-betting a decent amount of hands that can check continue in this range. So yeah, I mean, you have so many options here with so many different hands. But with this one, I think actually betting could be okay. Could put some pressure on his flush draw hands and his pair plus gutter hands, which might fold to a bet but have a lot of equity and have lots of options when we check to him. Like he can bet or he can check behind, and once the diamond rolls off and he bets, I can't really do anything. So this next hand is against a player who's shorter stacked and opening kind of wide. I'm not sure if he's a reg or not. I only had 21 hands on him. But I do raise, and he calls. And this is, again, just a 3-bet. It's a little loose, but I don't think it's terrible at all. On the flop, we have options. If he was stabbing really wide, which I'm not really sure if he is, then it just makes a really good check-raise hand because there's a lot of hands that want to stab here, like any pair plus gutter or even a bare open-ender or an overpair or anything. Like, I think he'll have a lot of the time. And it'll be interesting to look in some poker software to see how often he does have a hand that can stab here. Against some players who are not overstabbing here, realizing they should be check raising a lot, you can go ahead and just bet for value yourself. Because especially with his stack size, turns aren't going to be as difficult. That's one of the main reasons to check a hand like this to raise, is so you don't have to play turns. Because there's a lot of straightening turns and lots of hands you might lose action on if you allow him to check back. So I guess with my range here, I actually would just pot it here, given the SPR that I want to bet with. But I chose a smaller size, maybe to induce, but it kind of induced just a peel. And I think his peeling range includes lots of open-enders and stuff like that. I really didn't want to give a free card despite probably not getting called too wide here. But I just wanted to protect my hand, and since there's less than a pot size bet left, I just decided to pot and ended up running into ace 10. So happens sometimes. I think this next hand is going to be our last one. I did get through a decent amount of hands, although not all of them. I thought this hand was pretty interesting. So villain opens. We don't have much in the way of reads on villain, although he's probably a tight reg or standard reg anyway. We 3-bet kings. They're single suited and somewhat connected. Can't be too bad. There's something to be said for keeping the big blind in the hand. Maybe he's going to squeeze a lot. So actually, this might be like, again, a hand you can peel, because if big blind's going to squeeze, then we can back raise quite effectively here. As it stands, I isolated the reg on the button. And we get on to the flop here. Again, it's an ace high board. I'm going to be betting a lot. So I think I bet a little over half pot, which is my standard sizing here. It is, I think, a board we're going to be checking less than, for example, the board ace 9-8 rainbow. the first hand of the video where we looked at Omaha Ranger, because this is a board where we're not going to have, with a lot of our 3-betting range, we're not going to have like a great barreling hand on the turn, and lots of turns can change the nuts really easily. Like any deuce 3, 5, 7, 8, 6, 4 can be really difficult because we're not going to have many boats or straights on those boards, aside from like top set or like 7, 5, 8 if we bet it. So I think we'd actually be betting this board with a little less frequency than and going for more with check calls with than ace 9 8 or maybe ace jack 10, something like that. So we do see bet, and I think this is a pretty decent hand for it. I think once we check, it becomes kind of difficult. But I think this is like a decent bluffing hand. We have some backdoors that we can bluff, and it becomes kind of it seems like a good idea to try to just win the pot now. It seems kind of advantageous. I think that's the word I was looking for. And villain calls, and in real time I checked here, but I think in retrospect I think barreling here would be a really good option because it puts some pressure on his ace high hands, or like his top pair hands, and even like his open-ender kind of hands. And he shouldn't have a ton of 4s, although he'll have them sometimes. But a lot of his range here, we can set up half pot here and then a almost 3/4 the barrel on the river. So that'd be a good option, I think, with this hand, because we picked up some equity versus top pair hands, which might peel. So we can like try to show down the river or bet for value depending on what we want. We can still hit our king. And also, we don't block 7-5 and 5-3 from his range. So I think having these, what are they called now, reverse blockers, are very beneficial for us, because he has those hands more often. And he decided to check, and he checks back. And on the river, I just try to show down here, maybe try to bluff catch, but he does not oblige in bluffing because he has the actual hands, and I like his turn play. I think he doesn't really need to protect against anything, and he lets me maybe potentially bluff the river as well. And it's kind of hard to bet for value too. It's just ace jack, so he could bet maybe smaller if as a kind of like a play to make it tough to play against. But overall, I think I like how he played the hand. And that's it for this video. In the next couple of videos, I think I'll be looking at some more multi-way spots post-flop, so those will get really interesting. And I think those hands will probably feature just 1 or maybe 0 hands in Omaha Ranger, because they become so difficult to break down multiple opponents' ranges. So I think I'll just be talking mostly qualitative for those videos. So until next time, let me know how you like this video. Give me any feedback. I probably won't see the comments until the other videos come out, but definitely just send me some feedback, because for future videos I'd like to know what you think. So this has been Andrew Go for Counterest.com. Hope you learned something, and again, let me know what you think. Thanks, guys.